or that fall, I guess, I saw Fugazi at the Washington Monument. It was their second Monument show. And that was like my second, punk show. And it's amazing to go back and look at the videos for that on YouTube now, because, the camera pans across the crowd and I can find myself and all my high school friends. I can find friends that I wouldn't meet until 5, 6, 10 years later, future bandmates. It's like an amazing document. It feels like my middle-aged friend group still is there at this thing. I would love to try to put together some kind of zine world history or something of all my friends who have been there. I mean,
Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. My name is Philip, and today we have an awesome episode. This is actually our season finale. This is going to be the end of season 2. We've had so many great guests, and we are ending in style. We have the Washington Post pop music critic Chris Richards with us today, which is a thrill on so many levels. He was also in the band Q and Not You, and has been writing just incredible reviews and articles on music and culture for years now at the Post. Quick story and kind of how we got here for this episode. In 2020, No Trend, which is the band we're talking about today, they released a reissue via Drag City of their early albums from the 80s. And Chris wrote a really poignant article for the Washington Post, and again, this was in May of 2020, so it was a weird time. Things were very weird, and it just fit the mood so perfectly. The article and the reissue both came at the right time for me and for a lot of people. I didn't know No Trend's music before this, but I've loved it ever since, and it's a great way to end this season because so much of what we talked about this season was in lockstep with one another. A lot of the DC hardcore bands were good friends and kind of had the same mindset. And No Trend was just a little bit against the grain, or a lot of bit against the grain. They were really subversive and cool and brutally honest band, and there's lots to dig in here. So it was great to do this with Chris, who is again the person that introduced me to No Trend. So hopefully you all will enjoy it as much as I did. This was just a great conversation, and thanks again for everything. Season 2 has been a dream. We have a lot of season 3 stuff already cooking, and we're going to take a little break to rest and recoup, and then we will see you in the fall. So without further ado, let's get into our hardcore history segment.
Flex your head. It's time for some hardcore history.
No Trend was formed in 1982 in Ashton, Maryland by Jeff Mencius on vocals, Frank Price on guitar, and Bob Strasser on bass, with Michael Salkin joining later on drums. From the beginning, the band positioned itself as a reaction to the prevailing cultural and musical trends. Their approach was rooted in confrontation, both musically and ideologically. Instead of aligning with any particular movement, they crafted a sound that was repetitive, abrasive, and purposefully unsettling. Then they paired that with lyrics that openly mocked conformity and social norms. Their debut album, Too Many Humans, was self-released in 1983 and recorded at Inner Ear Studios with Don Zentera. The record featured minimalist, distorted instrumentation and stark lyrical content, touching on themes such as consumerism, alienation, and family life. The band's presentation extended beyond the music. They distributed flyers that satirized punk fashion and attitudes, and often performed in ways designed to frustrate and provoke their audience. Their follow-up EP, Teen Love, continued these themes, combining grotesque humor with stripped-down production. Though No Trend's music overlapped with the hardcore scene in time and geography, their philosophy set them apart. While many DC bands were defining a new youth culture, No Trend aimed to dismantle it. They played at venues like the 930 Club and occasionally shared bills with punk and experimental acts, but they maintained a critical stance toward all subcultural identity. Their work occupies a distinct space in the history of DC's musical underground, representing a moment when internal critique and boundary pushing took precedence over cohesion. Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. We have an incredible episode today. We are talking about the band No Trend and their album Too Many Humans plus Teen Love. This is an unflinching record. There is so much to get into with this band and this music. But before we get into all that, Alex, how are you today? How are you feeling?
I'm cold. It's very cold. But my leg is doing better, which is great. And um, you know, the DC area in particular during the holiday season is extraordinarily quiet, and that is like the best part of it. It's just it's much, much slower pace, and I love it. How about y'all? How are y'all doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying the slow pace of the holidays myself, and yeah, I'm on the end of my paternity leave, so I'm going to be going back into the real world come January, and that's like a one long prolonged Sunday scary for me, but try not to dwell on that. Um, and before we get any further, let us introduce our guest. We have an incredible guest on the podcast today. He is the founding member of Q and Not You, the incredible rock band from Washington, D.C. And he's also the Washington Post pop music critic. Um, I have been listening to his music for 20 years. I have been reading his columns religiously for 10. Please welcome to the podcast, Chris Richards. Chris, how are you feeling today?
Very well, thanks. Glad to be here. Really interested in what you guys are doing. The other podcasts have been such cool selections of records, and to have the opportunity to talk about this band I'm super stoked. So thanks for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. One thing that we like to ask folks right up top is what's an early DC memory you have, early DC music memory. But I'd love to ask you kind of a different question. You've been doing such great coverage of the music scene in DC for a long time now. Do you have an early memory, an earliest memory of going to a show where you knew you were going to be writing about the band? Bonus points if it was a DC band, but if it was a touring act, that counts too.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I mean, the earliest memory I probably have of that were the concert reviews I wrote for my fanzine when I was still in high school. It was called Torpedo Dialogues. I was kind of mean in some of these reviews. I think I kind of gave the band Cold Hearts sort of like a skeptical, sneering kind of take, which was undeserved because I love them now. I was definitely a childish punk who kind of talked down to things I didn't quite understand at the time. But one thing that was formative about doing that zine early on is that I in the very first issue I wrote about how the balding white male critics of the Washington Post don't know anything, and then I became my enemy, like literally over time. So kind of funny to kind of become the thing that you were attacking in a lot of ways. So I always take any kind of like angry reader response I get in great stride, because I was once the angry Washington Post reader when I was a teenage punk. So
Billy Joel's angry young man yourself.
Yeah.
And am I right that you grew up in Annapolis, Maryland? Was that show in Annapolis, or was it something you drove into DC for?
drove into the city for Cold Hearts. I think they were opening for Slater Kinney, and
Nice.
another band I really liked at the time called the VSS also played, but I got there too late, which was such an anomaly for my adolescence because I was always showing up at the show like 2 hours too early and waiting out on the street for the doors to open. So I don't know how I missed them, but Slater Kinney, Dig Me Out had just come out, and they were kind of like the toast of the world. They were in Newsweek magazine at the time, so it was a very kind of like supercharged night. But apologies to Cold Hearts, who are a legendary, fantastic band, and I love their music dearly now. But yeah, it was a black cat. Did I say that? It was a black cat in Washington, D.C.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, what was your relationship like between like living in Annapolis and DC? I don't know if you've ever lived in the city or if you've always lived in Maryland or what, but yeah, we love to talk about just like people's relationships to venues and the scene generally. So I'd love to hear about that, what it felt like.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. A friend of mine who became my friend, she was a stranger. She moved to town. Her name was Deanna. My freshman year of high school, and this would have been 1993. I was very much into like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, all the kind of bands that were happening on MTV and the radio and WHFS at the time. But she rolled up and she had like, Bikini Kill t-shirts and like different kinds of punk patches, Dead Kennedys. And the first week of school, she gave me a Fugazi tape. She gave me a Black Flag tape. She gave me an Operation Ivy tape. She gave me a Sonic Youth tape. And she just totally put me on. Within like 2 weeks, I had like a pretty awesome starter kit of, hardcore punk, dubbed onto TDK cassette. So once I figured out that Fugazi and Minor Threat were happening, obviously Minor Threat was over, but Fugazi was an active band like 45 minutes down the road. That was very almost shocking to me. And then I started going to see them play. And it wasn't entirely, Deanna put me on, but then there was also this really great show on WHFS at the time called Now Hear This that was hosted by a guy named Dave Marsh. He had local bands from the scene come in and perform in a segment of his show on Sunday nights called Dave's Garage. So that got me and my friend group into bands like Frodis and Pitchblende and Edsel and Shudder to Think and Jawbox. So my first punk show was Jawbox at the old 930 Club. They played for free in May of 1994. I think that's the right date, maybe 95. And then that summertime, or that fall, I guess, I saw Fugazi at the Washington Monument. It was their second Monument show. And that was like my second, punk show. And it's amazing to go back and look at the videos for that on YouTube now, because, the camera pans across the crowd and I can find myself and all my high school friends. I can find friends that I wouldn't meet until 5, 6, 10 years later, future bandmates. It's like an amazing document. It feels like my middle-aged friend group still is there at this thing. I would love to try to like put together some kind of zine world history or something of all my friends who have been there. I mean, my friend Sam Chinta, who lives right across the street from me, he's a musician here in DC. He was there on the stage. John Davis from Q Not You, he was on the stage watching them. So it's just this incredible summit of people. And I always kind of make this joke that in DC, the all ages scene goes in both directions. But it's cool because it's like, I think a lot of people who become a part of this community are lifers, and I'm still so happy to be living alongside so many of these people who are at this like formative thing for me.
How cool. Yeah. Gosh, that sparks so much for me, but I'll just say briefly, and I think I might have even told you the story before, but you having a friend who turned you on to all this stuff when I was in middle school, I was just voracious music nerd, and it was like I needed to know about every band everywhere. And a friend of mine who was cooler and a little older than me was like, I'm going to the Q and Not You farewell show at Black Cat. And I just so desperately wanted to go, and I couldn't go for whatever reason. But I remember being like, I need to know who this band is. I need to know everything about them. Cool people are going to this show. This is going to be the coolest thing ever. So that's when I dove in and got all the CDs that I could from maybe Olsen's, if that tracks. I don't know. Yeah. So way back in the day.
Yeah.
So that's there's a little full circle moment for you. It's always
That's
that
really
cool
cool,
friend
man.
who turns you on to everything.
For sure. And I'm sorry you missed it, but I also have like a list of all the shows I missed in high school that I really wish I was there for. And they
Yeah.
hold like a mystique that's almost as powerful as the shows that I was at. You know what I mean? I'm busy on the internet trying to collect photos and flyers from all these shows that I missed, Bikini Kill at the Marvin Center at GW 96,
Yep.
tons of them. So anyway, so glad to be connected to you that way. That's awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's we're living in a cool time. I'm on paternity leave. I'm out at nightclubs less than I was this time last year. And just shout out to Black Cat again, because they will post like the day after, they'll post on their Instagram account. So it's nice as a new dad to still feel like I can get a little piece of that. You piece those shows that you missed together from the internet these days, which is cool.
Yeah,
But
we gained a lot of parasocial skills in the pandemic. Right? We learned how to live in a digital world a little bit better sometimes, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes. And now on to our famous segment, the DC rock history icebreaker, which everyone waits for. It's of course a question that I haven't prepared the guest or even Alex with in this case. This one's a really specific question because I've been thinking about it a lot with this album. It's a very specific question to this album and to this band.
there is, well, let me start with the question, and then I'll kick it off, and you'll see why. What is the last time that something or someone made you change your mind or changed your mind? When was the last time you had your mind changed? Now, I'll say I have shared some of the antinatalist beliefs of the band No Trend at various times in my life, but I just had a kid. And it's been an interesting year, and I've thought about this album a lot, even before I knew we were going to be talking about it, because my old Ebenezer Scrooge ways have been put aside, because I think I learned not the cliche that I thought that I was going to learn about, like, oh, life, new life, blah blah blah. It's I had to acquire skills very quickly and very immediately that I felt completely unprepared for. And then that happened like 5 or 6 times in a row. And then I began to think of myself as a person who could acquire new skills and a person whose ideas might not be fixed. And this was very unintentional. But over the course of this year, I've seen a change in myself, which, I don't care for at all, because I don't like to change. I'm fixed in my ways. But no, I'm kidding. But like, for real, uh, it's been a funny switcheroo. I thought that me having a kid would affect me more in terms of like the way I felt for them, and that's all been true. But it has more to do with, oh gosh, I can perhaps do more than I thought myself capable of. So that was the last time my mind was changed. And Alex, I'll bump it over to you. What about you? When was the last time your mind was changed?
That seemed like a humble brag to me. No offense. The last time I changed my mind is when I decided to be a better person. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's great. And I prepared it for weeks. So
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I just sat in that.
I don't know. The last time my mind was changed, in a dramatic sense, that's hard. I don't know. I think that's pretty tough. I think probably like the biggest change that I've had in the last 10 years is just seeing sort of like how things, like, it's really an overwrought saying, but like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like seeing that play out, like as I touch my 50s, that's been sort of, that changed my mind. Is like, I was like, no, like, like there's definitely like, there'll be like new stuff, and you're like, oh no, it's the same cycle. And that, I guess, sort of changed my mind, if you will.
Love it. Chris, what about you?
Really tough. I feel like I'm kind of sneaking out of the question by making it really musical, but one fundamental kind of music overhaul I've had in my mind is sort of learning how to embrace nostalgia. I used to be incredibly against nostalgia. I thought it was a retreat. I thought it was like a cowardice to face the present. Um, it was a refusal to engage with right now or to imagine the future. I had a really bad uh, feeling about just nostalgic feelings and going back. I wanted to feel like forward motion all the time. And then when the pandemic hit, there was no present to engage in, really. The nightlife stopped, so to speak, and it forced me to like, the musical experiences I was having were on my record shelves exclusively. And I started really revisiting a lot of the formative music of my youth. And then when we came out of it, Black Eyes, the band that was like Q and Not Use, sort of one of our best friends groups, like our closest touring comrades and stuff, they reunited, and being a part of like sitting kind of in the shotgun to their whole experience, because I helped them put together a zine that they released in conjunction with their reunion. I just realized, like, with nostalgia, it's not entirely about like retreat or return. It's maybe about, or it can be about going back and sort of like retrieving things that mean something to you from your youth and bringing them with you, you know, into your present. Hopefully, you help carrying them with you as you go into your unknown future. I remember feeling a sense of, possibility and like almost like sort of indestructible kind of mindset when you're a teenager. You get really poised and think the only way forward is forward. It's easy to kind of lose that energy as you go through life. So for me, like, the nostalgia trip of like reconnecting with music from back then hasn't been like, oh, wasn't it so much better in 1997? It's more like, what can I take that was good about 1997 and like plunk it into my 2024, 2025 and like help use it as rocket fuel to kind of keep moving forward. So that might be a humble brag too, to be like, I learned how to use my, my numero group purchases to, feel optimistic about tomorrow. But it was valuable to me. And also too, I just think like any kind of change we have is like, in my life anyway, the changes that I've experienced have always been incremental, and like hopefully when they're progressive, they're like toward empathy. And then just try to understand other people's perspectives more, So I'm glad that I can like relate to people who have been in nostalgia zones for a long time now, like in a new kind of way. And that just kind of applies to everything. What you're talking about, parenthood is huge. Obviously, I had no sympathy for exhausted parents when I was wildest, and now, I try not to indulge too much in like, oh, I'm so tired talk,
Yeah.
but I can at least tolerate it from others now.
What's your music diet like these days? Are you constantly listening to new music? Do you have any sort of rhyme or reason for how you filter in old stuff?
There's no, not really. Well, maybe that's actually not true at all. I'm weirdly systematic about like listening to older things. Like, I'm always cycling through the alphabet of the shelves. Like we did, this is another pandemic project. I was like, let's listen to all the records in our house in alphabetical order, loosely, but I made a spreadsheet of everything we have under the roof while we did it just for fun. And then I just realized like when I got to Z, we were like, hey, let's do it again. You know what I mean? Like, so we're just kind of always cycling through the alphabet on, 7-inches, cassettes, CDs, LPs. There's a lot of physical media in our house. And then digitally, it's just like kind of the wild mess that everyone's going through. You're getting recommendations from your friends constantly. You're reading about things. So it's way more chaotic in the present tense, through digital places. But anytime something really means something to me, I always try to get it on a physical format. Not in any kind of like snobbery way. I just literally want music to have a material presence in my world. If I really care about it. So, like my top 10 lists that run in the post at the end of the year, like all those records, if they exist in physical formats, are under our roof right now. So I really like to have it and have it be part of my reality.
Yes, and that's an interesting time for that right now, with things being available on different platforms or not available on different platforms. And yeah, I gosh, again, much to say about that. But I think it's a good time to transition into our talk about the band of the day, No Trend. And one way that I can jump off of what you were just saying is, the first time that I heard this record was actually in the pandemic. You wrote a great piece, and I was living with my folks at the time, and they get the newspaper, the real one, not the digital one like I read. And it was a big spread, and it was just a delightful way to spend a Sunday morning or whatever, whenever I ended up reading it. And I mean, I think it's the first track right off the bat. We're talking about acid rain, and we're talking about the world being an inhospitable place. And it just felt so relevant and potent and right. And I listened to it a bunch in 2020. And then I honestly, I probably just listened to Teen Love, is the only one that I've had on my rotation the last couple of years. But I have a compliment for you, or a thank you, because we had this scheduled for a certain time and then we rescheduled it. And I had been binge listening for a week, and the headspace that puts you in is just very unique. So when we were originally going to record this episode, I was just in a different place, and it is partially life and partially the music. And then I listened to it again today. I thought, God, this is like so fresh. It's so good. I got a little bit of distance between the binge listening and the listening now. But yeah, I'd love to hear from both of you guys. What was your first experience with this record? Alex, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I think this is one of those records that for me, I'm certain that friends have played it for me, and I probably did not give it much attention, for whatever reason. Maybe it just wasn't a style that I was into at the time. but it strikes me as something like I would have been like in 1982, I would have been 6 years old. And I don't think it would have necessarily resonated with the 6-year-old me. But I definitely wish I would have discovered it, in my like early 20s for sure, because the energy and the message is so resonant and still even like I think you mentioned earlier, Phil, like, like you can still connect with it a little bit, and I definitely like I enjoyed the spirit of that. But from a distance, for whatever reason, because I had a TV dinner last night and I don't think that's very punk rock, but you know what I'm feeling. I really
Get a
enjoyed
TV
it
party.
so much. Yeah, I enjoyed it so much. And I'm glad, in a way, I'm kind of glad that I don't look at it from a nostalgic point of view because it makes me, I think, like it a little bit more than I would have with like thinking, out of the corner of my eye, like, oh, I'm just clicking into the way it makes me feel when I was young. So I'm free of that. I'm free of that.
Cool.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I first found out about No Trend in probably the coolest way possible. The Teen Love album cover, the gray version, was on the wall at Inner Ear Studios the first time the Q Not You recorded there. And the cover illustration, which is credited to Jim Jones, whoever that is amazing. It's like two either parents or grandparents with like three like disgusting children. One of them is wearing a Smurfs shirt. Another little kid making a horrible little wretched face has a shirt that says "I Heart Baltimore." And I mean, obviously we were having the time of our lives recording for the first time at Inner Ear when I was 19, but I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I'd never heard of them before. So I had to ask around and I couldn't find a copy of the record because it was pretty rare and hard to get at the time. But someone played No Trend for me somewhere along the line, like in the Q Not You years. And I was like, wow, this is intense. And then I just kept looking for it forever and ever and ever. And then YouTube kind of caught up and it was there for me for long. And then Drag City put out this box set that I wrote about that you mentioned in 2020. And that was my first like time I owned a No Trend record. Now, the really wild part is Inner Ear, as you guys know, the studio kind of disassembled and has moved now. Don Zantaro is recording in his home again. But taking a part of the second Inner Ear studio, they had to get rid of all the stuff in there. So I actually bought the copy of the actual record from Joint Custody. Joint Custody had gotten a bunch of those records in. So it was really awesome because it was like reconnection with the actual, like something that I saw with my own eyes and said, what is this? And now it's, under our roof. So I'm really stoked to kind of be brought back to the contact point in that sense. But yeah, like Alex was just saying, finding it in your late teens and early 20s, yeah, it's a pretty great time to find out about No Trend. And then it kind of became sort of like a little bit of a white whale scenario. And also too, like they're kind of this unknowable band, as we will continue to talk about, but like there's just so little information kind of about them out there, that, there is a ton of mystique and a ton of mystery. And I really like that about them as well. So it's been fun to have this long, 25-year relationship with this music so far for me.
Yeah. And getting into a little bit of the history, they were formed in Ashton, Maryland, and as is tradition, I'll read off the names and certainly mispronounce them. We have Jeff Menkes on vocals, Frank Price on guitar, Bob Strasser on bass, and Michael Salkind on drums. That was the founding membership lineup. Play at local venues like Psychedelic. Yeah, Chris, are you very familiar with Ashton, Maryland? Is that I get a little lost in Southern Maryland. Is that close to Annapolis or?
It's not exactly so. It's up kind of by Olney, sort of like
Okay.
on like Montgomery, I think Baltimore County border. I know the members of No Trend went to Sherwood High School. I know they played the Sherwood Auditorium at some point. And I do know it a little well. My wife Caitlin grew up in Olney, so when I was actually writing the story for the post, I actually drove up to Ashton because the address of where the band rehearsed is printed on their records, and I thought, well, let me go see this place. Is there going to be like a black crater of nuclear evil blown in the earth there? But it's this idyllic little countryside kind of suburbs. They call it the stick burbs in the liner notes for the box set. And there's that line too in the song Family Style where they're talking about what is it like? It's like corporate farmland or something like countryside machine. I can't remember, factory countrysides, but it really is like a kind of place where like one of those ex-urban sort of zones where like there are pastures with animals, but then also these giant power lines going through it. It's a place kind of where like I imagine in the Reagan years, it was where like industry was kind of creeping into this sort of like idyllic countryside kind of vibe. So I think what No Trend was singing about was very, very real in every sense, really.
Yeah, we've got community trash heap, carbon monoxide, industrial countryside, average intelligence, public opinion, and then this is my absolute favorite, Nielsen ratings, which is just the great line.
Don't forget
they're all
the
great.
sterilization through venereal disease.
Yeah. I'm partial to Nielsen ratings myself. But it's I mean, okay, I had this thought while I was listening today. The dullest phrase of all time applies to this record. It holds a mirror up to society. Now, that's the stupidest phrase, but it usually doesn't apply. But in this case, it really does, because let's talk about it a little bit in the context of the other bands that were in DC at the time. Teen Idols have come and gone. SOA, Minor Threat, Bad Brains. I'll say not in Bad Brains' case, but in maybe all the other bands' cases, there's sort of a call to action with all those other bands. No Trend engages in none of that. It's like, here is your dystopian humanity. I mean, even saying that's too far. Here's life. Deal with it. And I don't know, is it absurdist? It's almost like Camus or something. It's like you end up with less than you had before you started when you listen to these songs. And I mean that in a good way, because there's not much that does this so relentlessly and with so few answers. Discuss. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were total outsiders in every way. First of
Yeah.
all, geographically, like we said, they come from Ashton, which is way out in the sort of like Oort cloud of the DC suburbs, if you will. And then when they do come to town, they go around, Jeff goes around town, goes to Georgetown and puts up, sort of like anti-scene flyers, saying No Trend, you know what I mean? To kind of like antagonize everyone. And I think they had this idea that like, they could stand apart by being like the real punks, you know what I mean? Like they saw in the hardcore scene all the things that hardcore was supposed to be against, you know what I mean? They if you join the hardcore community as a declaration of anti-conformity, you therefore must conform to the norms of hardcore punk or whatever. And it's a little like proto edgelordy, right? Let's be real. You know what I mean? Like it's very trolly. But at the same time too, I think that their distance from the scene probably gave them a freedom to like make their songs about things that maybe people in proper hardcore would think are too corny or too cheesy. I mean, a song like Reality Breakdown, like Jeff mentions, like literally goes to the guidance counselor's office at Sherwood High School and makes lyrics out of the pamphlet flyers that are there, like the little pamphlets that are there for like self-help for teenagers, like alcohol and drugs, making friends, self-confidence. It's like total like teenage feel sorry for yourself Kafka stuff. And they probably felt like they could get away with it because they weren't like at ground zero, and they knew they were being judged. They wanted to be judged. They kind of didn't fear the criticism because they were courting it in a lot of ways. And then because they had the freedom to like go there and be so misanthropic and childish about it, they could just like absolutely sink into it and totally see. Because the thing is, like, this music would be awful if it was like if it sounded superficial, but it sounds so convinced of itself. You know what I mean? So much of that is in the vocal performances, which we can talk about too, but like they just absolutely believed what they were doing. Which I do think is like that's the thing that puts them in the hardcore lineage. You know what I mean? Like if there was anything that makes them a true hardcore band, is like they believe what they were talking about, and they believed in themselves to some degree. And that puts them, I think, in this community that they wanted to like be a part of, but also wanted to like say they had nothing to do with at the same time. So They're total contrarians and fascinating. And the music is just awesome because of it.
It's let me pull on that edgelord thread a bit, because if they had been if they'd only put up the flyers, that might have been provocative and interesting to a few people for a bit. But what they did, and honestly, if you take the lyrics and look at them and you've never heard the music, I don't know how much that would impact you. The music's just incredible. Like, it's incredible and grating, and it's really good guitar work. And I think it's pre-Fugazi in a way that is I'd never heard about. I'd never heard anyone speak about it that way, and but I don't hear a ton of people talking about No Trend, regardless. But anyways, I mean, God, I don't. What's the musical term? Is it an arpeggio when you go between two notes? Maybe technically, but those really slow arpeggios and the drums and the tempos, it just felt so Fugazi to me listening to it this time, in the best way. And it's definitely not where the other DC hardcore bands are. And I think, it's a great argument for attitude and musicality being. You'll I can never quite word this correctly, but my theory is you'll never be more clever than music is powerful. And they took this music that they took these words that they knew could have an impact, and they just put it to brilliant music, and that is what the secret sauce is. That's where there's an alchemy between or in what's going on here. Yeah, gosh, and then it's funny. I'm glad I knew that it was recorded at Inner Ear, but I hadn't really thought about it in a minute. And then hearing you tell that story about literally being a Discord band that recorded at Inner Ear, it's so funny because it's not the narcissism of smaller princess, but it's so funny that in the end it all does come back to Don. It's like you try, but you're not going to get away from Inner Ear. You might not be a hardcore band, but you're still recorded there.
Sure.
And yeah,
But I mean, that's the thing. They definitely wanted to be noticed and included in some kind of way. They went to Georgetown to hang the flyers up to get people to pay attention. They weren't just playing in Ashton and letting the world come to them. They wanted to be a part of this at some point. And what you're saying too about slowness and tempo, I think that's huge because, and using it to kind of predict Fugazi is also really interesting too, because you had with hardcores speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, speeding up, and all the bands that found the next step. It was a tempo thing, you know what I mean? It was Black Flag, slowing you down on My War, you know what I mean? It's No Trend, it's Flipper, and then eventually it's Fugazi, you know what I mean? This idea that you can only go so far before you kind of break the sound barrier with speed. You have to slow it back down again. So I love, but they were, of course, that was part of their thing. It's oh, this is a scene known for PMA or whatever. Okay, we're incredibly negative. Oh, the songs are fast, we're slow. You guys dress this way, in tight denim and leather jackets and stuff. We wear baggy, Afghan stuff we found at the thrift store. You know what I mean? Everything was meant to antagonize every single thing they did. And that's so awesome.
Yeah. I definitely do hear some guitar influence on the Q and Not You stuff too. I don't know if that was ever conscious or not, but and maybe it's just a big stew of a bunch of stuff that's all in this area and people, but they're yeah, I don't know. Some of that slower guitar playing that then picks up and stuff.
I have a very metaphysical answer to that too, which I don't think I was well versed enough in No Trend to have it be influenced directly, oh, let's take this riff or let's do it like that.
Right.
But I do have this sort of belief that this will sound very woo-woo, but I really think that certain geographic areas and circumstances, they create certain sound ideas that are just transmissible whether we know it or not. And I think that everyone is kind of influenced around from each other. There's just this psychic residue of music floating around at all times, and I think people are always picking up on it and utilizing it whether they know it or not. And I'm hearing more and more things the further we go. This is kind of part of the nostalgia trip, going back and listening to a lot of the music that I was listening to when I was younger, and also the music that I wasn't listening to that I missed out on when I was younger. It's wow, how did my bands sound like these bands that were happening at the same time that I never heard? It's just kind of this group mind frequency thing that I really think is real and exists. So even if No
Yeah.
Trend wasn't an influence on us, I think they just, by virtue of the fact that they were floating, in the brainwaves around us, it somehow gets in there. I really
Yeah.
believe that.
No, not to jump around too much, but we were talking about Roy Buchanan and Danny Gatton together, and the way that the Anacostia Delta fused music from the North and the South, and other, bluegrass and rockabilly and rock and all that. And yeah, I mean, that's literally a geographic thing. That's because those kinds of records were going to be on sale at Joe's Record Paradise or whatever. Like, right? It's especially the farther back you go, which was what season 1 was such a delight for that, because the limitations of technology and availability and stuff made things so much more. Like the transmission lines were clearer a bit. But yeah, totally still a thing back in this time. Yeah. Would you be, Chris, would you be embarrassed if I read a bit of you to you? Since you're on your phone and I have a computer here.
Go right ahead.
All right,
I
this
can take
is
it.
okay. No Trend was a worldview, furious disappointment, a sound, ravishing ugliness, a time, the Reagan era, and a place, a pastoral suburb between Baltimore and Washington. But the last one gets talked about the least. How could a band as severe as No Trend come from a place as tranquil as Ashton? You have to drive there to find out. Terrific writing, and a great way to kind of put us in the headspace, for this record, and we'll move into our listening section in just a second. But yeah, Alex or Chris, is there anything that either of you would like to say about the our scene report, other bands at the time, because No Trend was the anti-hardcore band. So is there anything from the early 80s, 1983, that you think might be relevant to throw in before we dive into the listening section?
I think they just kind of come between things in DC. Minor Threat played their last show in 1983. No Trend sort of makes their arrival in 1983, and then Revolution Summer starts, after that. So they're kind of like this sort of like bad mood interstitial period for DC hardcore, and I love that. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Revolution Summer is 85, is that right? So it's
Oh
like
my
a big
gosh.
reset.
Take my credit card, but yeah.
It's we'll look at that many times too, but the difference between before and after that is so it's so interesting, the turns that happen among people who were in bands before and after and all that stuff. And yeah, I think you're spot on that this was sort of No Trend's time to, I don't know if pop was the right word, but to exist.
Yeah, just capture
to
just
emerge.
capture the mood, capture the uncertainty and the sort of failure vibe that was floating through the scene at the time. A lot of people were thinking like hardcore's over, and so it makes a lot of sense that this is the moment that they did what they did.
Indeed. Cool. Well, let's start with Teen Love.
They met during social interaction in algebra class. She was expressionless at first, but then smiled to indicate submission. He rearranged his facial features to appear friendly. After determining that their popularity status was comparable, they decided that a relationship would be mutually beneficial. They were careful to be seen together in all the local fast food franchises. He had a stylized speech pattern. She used all the newest slang. When they talked on the telephone, they had trouble generating conversation stimulus. They programmed arguments into their relationship to make their lives seem meaningful. They could act really mad, happy, or even sad, according to the current prefabricated social circumstances. They had copied all aspects of their behavior from what they had observed in society.
All right. Teen love. Is it just me, or is that like a Mork and Mindy situation? Is that an alien imitating people, or is it just the way that it's written? Is that ever resolved, or anybody know?
Yeah, I always thought it was like a precursor to the Not a Surf song Popular. Remember that one? The guy gets up in front of the classroom on MTV and kind of start talking about what you can do to be popular. That one's more of an instructional video, but like you're saying, yeah, this is like the observer, the scientific observer talking about the absurdity of adolescence. Obviously coming from like a scorned outsider's perspective, repurposes like the scientific guy with the clipboard observing what's happening. But cool song. Not my favorite No Trend song, but it was absolutely their most popular and got them played on college radio and kind of became their calling card in a weird way. So yeah, people seem to like it, and they did a US tour, and I think this song was the reason why they were able to do it. Otherwise, it would have just been like, I think the other music was just too hateful to get the traction they needed to get across the country back then.
Yeah,
from my understanding, anyway.
It's really long, and it has sort of a distinct middle breakdown section. So folks at home, if you haven't heard it, make sure to check the whole thing out. Yeah, in a weird way, it reminds me of like Bohemian Rhapsody, which is not right, but like, it's just like so epic that there's something about it where I'm anticipating the changes, and it also has like a little bit of Can, which I feel like is an interesting thread, whether they knew it or not, to think about that German, I don't even know what you call that, but German rock and roll, I guess. Krautrock, yeah, okay, yeah. And yeah, it's loose and has the, like, I think sometimes what's also fun on this is to think about if it was put out today, it would be called like post-disco kind of, it would have the sort of, because the way there's the fifths on the bass and or octaves, whatever. And it's like, they predated that stuff, but then that stuff now gets repurposed on things like LCD Sound System and becomes something else, a different sort of pastiche, which it wasn't at the time. But yeah, it's just kind of fun to think about the order in which things came out and how they could maybe exist again if they were, even if they weren't released today. If you're hearing it for the first time today, well, all those things that you might funnel it through.
It's so cool that you hear all those roots too, because every time I hear this song, all I can think about is how 90s it feels. It reminds me of like King Missile, Detachable Penis, like all those kind of like novelty, alternative songs from the 90s where someone's kind of talking sternly and, it was Cake, right? Like she's going the distance, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like weird, so it seems like weirdly ahead of its time. So I've never really even thought about it. Like, where did this come from? That's really cool. Props to you, man. That's awesome.
It's kind of the fun thing of just like when you sit down and listen to music and you try to think about it, none of the good thoughts come. And then when you go for a walk or something, you're like, oh, this is kind of like that, And so that's just kind of one of those things that rose up for me today. Cool. Let's jump into Family Style. Any thoughts on that before we kick it off?
Just to think about it every Super Bowl Sunday for the rest of your life. You're Jeff in your mind saying, Super Bowl game!
All right, without further ado, Family Style.
Carbon monoxide.
Family Style. Alex, what do you think? You gonna play this at your Super Bowl party?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoy, and this, I sort of alluded to this earlier to tie it into what we were talking about, like when we were humble bragging about how we've improved our lives with our mindsets, is, because I was just clicking by, I saw that you had made a note on one of the articles is that let me see here. Hold on. No trend prophesized America's ruin, which is, and clicking into that stuff, especially hearing like them go through like pop culture and stuff, like just something so juicy and enjoyable about that. But then as you get older, you realize that like prophesizing the doom of like particular societies, that's like a fairly old thing to do. Like and so like, while it is fun to listen to it and hear it done really well, I do look at it a little bit from that perspective of like, well, I don't think prophesizing our doom is necessarily new on the scene either, but done so well, doesn't it? And it sounds so cool.
I think this is a really interesting point. I'd love to stay here for a second. All the bands from the early 80s that we're going to talk about, the hardcore bands or this anti-hardcore band, do you think of it as... I sort of vacillate between thinking of it as music that captures the way of thinking of, an adolescent mindset versus its evergreen thinking. Does that make sense? Why does it work? Does it work because it's capturing the adolescent angst and anger and frustration, or because it's something that we can live in further? Is it both? Probably. I don't know. There's something about this music, though, that begs that question, and other hardcore bands of this time. Does that make sense? Do you guys think about that ever?
They're kind of like, to me, that's like two strands of a rope intertwined, right? Like young people speak a really important truth because they are first entering society and being sort of confronted with like the disgusting injustice of it all, Yeah. So it is evergreen in a sense because there's new people turning 16 every day, you know what I mean? And they have to face this world for the first time and realize what a sham it is. So, and it can become tiresome, and it can be refreshing when people do it right and say it with the right kind of energy. I said something in the article I wrote, like how they kind of feel like the same old like sci-fi dystopian kick, you know what I mean? Where it's like, to get your point, Alex, like, yeah, we have been hearing about like the end of the world for a very, very long time. Like, humanity is obsessed with cataclysm and this idea of destruction. But as I just said, someone turns 16 every day and there's going to be a new take on it. And someone is seeing the present for the first time anew every day. So, I hope that like this can bring like, I don't know. I think if music like this is allowed to kind of like continue to thrive and circulate, I just hope it empowers more young people to kind of speak their sort of outraged truth at the same time,
That's beautiful. That's why you're the Washington Post pop music critic. Well said.
Maybe.
All right. Well, let's move on to reality breakdown. And then Chris, if you would be thinking about the last one that you want to listen to, we'll listen to reality breakdown. We'll talk plugs, and we'll go at them on your choice. Cool.
Alcohol and drugs, making friends, getting along with the family, developing self-confidence, self-respect, health, handling peer pressure,
What's that beautiful percussive noise in there? A ping.
I don't know.
I don't know, but it's great.
Head smashing against the wall. I mean, I gotta say, like, Jeff, just props to his vocals too. I was thinking a lot about his screaming and like what goes into a scream. Like there can be like sneering, like the sound you make like of disdain, and then there's like a growling sound that we make when we want to be menacing, and then there's like a retching sound that you make of disgust, and then there's like an agonized howling. And I feel like all punk screaming is kind of like a different recipe combination of those 4 or more things, and his is just so distinct. And it just made me, realize like I mean, obviously we know that DC hardcore is this incredibly rich tapestry of bands and so many great groups, but just like vocalists alone, like think about singing. Like if we talked about hardcore singers the way we talk about them in soul music or gospel or even rock and roll, it's like you had HR, you had, Guy and Ian, you have like Allison Wolf and Brad Mobile. There's all these like inventive ways of vocalizing in DC punk music. And just hearing him right now just made me kind of go off into that zone. His scream is so awesome. I just love
and
it.
they go a little slower, like we were saying, not like too much slower, but he has to hold the notes as a result, which is so much harder. And it's actually more of a Springsteen than it is like a Mackay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's growling through the note. Yeah. And it's like,
bro, you just compared No Trend to Bruce Springsteen. That is a first and amazing. My mind is blown. That's so cool. Yeah.
Like, there are those singers who can scream and sing simultaneously, but really holding the note. And he's doing that in a way that's like he's not getting it. Some of it, the other hardcore off, it's almost rap because it's so fast. You know what I mean? But this doesn't have that. It doesn't live in that space, so he has to sing it differently.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, any other notes on the scene, notes on the underground as we wrap up here? What do we think?
Can I give one massive shout out to Stan McPheeters, who wrote an incredible book called Mutations, The Many Strange Faces of Hardcore Punk, which includes the best writing about No Trend you can find anywhere. So if anyone's listening to this podcast and wants to go deeper, go find Sam's book. It's one of the best books about music straight up ever written. I love it. It's like a holy book to me on my bedside table always. But his writing about No Trend really pushed me back into this group, even before the Drag City stuff started to happen. So props to Sam for being one of the great hardcore punk thinkers of our time. His book is amazing. Everyone read Mutations.
Yes, this will be irrelevant when this episode comes out, but I'm going to buy it for myself for Christmas. So maybe for the next for the next holiday season, get it for the punk in your life. That looks terrific. We'll definitely make a link to that in the show notes. But awesome. On to our last segment, the plug segment. Alex, kick us off. What's going on in your life?
I would like to plug my friends at Razor Cake, a zine based out of Los Angeles, California. You should check out the Razor Cake zine if you're into No Trend and bands on the Discord label that we talk about so often. You should check out Razor Cake. Check it out. Do it now.
Check it out. Come on. Chris, what about yourself?
I guess I just shouted out Sam too early, but yeah, Sam McPheeters, Mutations, read it. Shout out to Shining Life, Zach and John. Shout out to Possessed Fanzine, Andreas. Shout out to Vivian for getting me into Intermission recently. Shout out to Paula and Ambrose at Demystification Zine. Shout out to Jack for Potion for Bad Dream Zine. When's issue number 3 going to come out? Come on, let's make this happen. Shout out to Vanessa and Santos for Outside the World. Shout out to Santos for Brick Digest. Shout out to all DC zines everywhere.
I love it. Shout out to Animal Holland for introducing me to Q and Not You. That was very cool. I think I will have nothing to plug at that in March, so we'll go out on that. Chris, what is your song that we'll go out on?
Let's go with Too Many Humans, which is actually so hateful, but maybe a pro-human song, a pro-ecology song. There's an interview with Frank Price, the guitarist from No Trend and Flipside, where he was talking about how he thinks the world is over polluted, and he's against this idea that like being for the ecology is passé or played out. So No Trend, an eco punk band, maybe.
Love it. We're going to go out on that. Thanks for listening, everybody. And Chris, please come back anytime.
I would love to. Thank you guys so much for what you're doing. Amazing work, and glad to be a part of it in any kind of way.
It's been really fun. And we can do independent listening because I'm going to drop the song in later. So we don't need to listen to it right now. But thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. Great job.
Thank you all very much, man. Appreciate you, and would love to do it again whenever cycle back around my way. I'm all for it.
Love it.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Later, guys.
Peace.
Humans! You breed like rats! And you're no fucking better! Too many fucking humans! You breed like rats!